Welcome to this edition of the High Strangeness Factor. I am your host, Steve Ward. On the High Strangeness Factor, we explore all aspects of the paranormal and the unexplained, including UFOs, cryptids, and ghostly phenomena. We are most interested in the patterns and connections that lie hidden beneath the surface, connections between seemingly disparate types of phenomena and also patterns that exist from folklore to the present day. Andy Mercer, welcome. You're my co-host.
Hello.
Yes, we've been trying to get this together since we did our first show together, and since then there's been either we have a bit of a time difference. That's one problem. Anywhere from 4 to 5 hours, depending on daylight savings time.
That we certainly do, as your listeners will recognize my voice. I'm obviously not American. I'm over in England, but a lot of our listeners are both in America and the UK, so some of them might actually recognize me. If they do, I apologize in advance.
So just out of curiosity, what now, when I was many years ago, when I was in visiting relatives in 1973, they had some kind of a comedy or variety show on, and they had some guy on that was mimicking the various accents from different parts of England. And of course, at that time, I wasn't aware that there were so many different, shall we say, varieties. So where would we say you hail from in England?
Well, I'm from Essex, which is to the east of London, but most people will tell you I do not sound like I'm from Essex at all.
Where do you sound like you're from?
No, in particular, apparently. It's just the south generally. I don't have sort of the typical Essex accent. There's no particular reason for it, and I haven't deliberately tried to not have my sort of local accent, but I don't. I don't really know why. People say, oh, you're from sort of somewhere in the southeast, Oxford way or Cambridge or, that kind of area, but no, just from Essex. But it is funny. It wasn't deliberate, it wasn't intentional. I just don't seem to have the accent of the area from which I'm from.
Well, I have absolutely no trouble understanding you.
That's good.
Actually, when I was nowadays, when I watch something like BBC America, I have to put on the closed captioning because I don't catch everything. But back in the old days, in 1973, with my younger ears, there were only 2 times when I could not pick up the accent or understand someone that well. But anyway, as my ears have aged, I've had to use an aid, namely closed captioning.
Well, some accents in the UK, I'd have trouble understanding. Some of them have become very broad and very colloquial. They're quite hard to follow for us, even though they're obviously compared to the size of America, we're quite small, but it is very wide and diverse. But yeah, so there's no particular reason why I don't sound the way I would if I were from the area I am from. It seems to have come about by itself.
Well, now that we've, as we were talking about before, it's important for radio hosts to have some banter before they start, because that way the listeners know that we are solid professionals. But now,
of course,
I think we should introduce our guest, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest, too, who happens to be a good friend. Emily Mittermaier is a paranormal researcher, an avid traveler, and a sensitive who has been interested in the unexplained since she was 4 years old. She writes about her paranormal travels and experiences in her blog, travelingspirit.com. That's one word, travelingspirit.com. Oh, wait a minute. It's travelingspirit.com. Well, we'll clear that up in a minute. And is always up for exploring areas of high strangeness. She lives in Morgantown, West Virginia, and enjoys her close proximity to paranormal hotspots such as Point Pleasant, Flatwoods, Grafton, Chestnut Ridge, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and the Moundsville State Penitentiary. Emily, welcome to the High Strangeness Factor.
Thank you, Steve and Andy. So happy to be here.
So first off, let's is it a travelingspirit.com?
Yes, a travelingspirit.com.
Yep. Okay, and you do a blog there?
I do. I try to. I am a little behind on posting. It takes a lot more effort than I originally thought to put together a post that I'm happy with. So, but yes, I do blog about my travels, most of them involving paranormal things. I definitely update it when I can.
Now, Morgantown and let's see, of course, Morgantown's where you live. Now, of course, Point Pleasant is the famous city in the famous town in West Virginia. Flatwoods in West Virginia. Where's Grafton? Is that West Virginia also?
It is.
Okay. And, of course, Chestnut Ridge is a area of Pennsylvania where I think that was the area that Stan Gordon first investigated back in the early mid-'70s with all the combination of the strange Bigfoot reports and the UFOs. Okay.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. And you haven't lived there that long, too. This is fairly recent, right?
No, just a few months.
You were an Ohio girl.
I was Cincinnati, which was actually closer to Point Pleasant than I am now. But I just like true. Being in West Virginia, where all the high strangeness action is.
By the way, before I forget, Emily and I have our correspondence on Mac Maloney's Military X-Files from time to time. And that's also can be heard on the Paranormal UK radio network. And the gang, Emily, all wanted me to say hi when they knew that you were going to be on the show.
I'll give them my best.
I will. So now I met you through Point Pleasant. We have our loose net group, the Mothman Irregulars, as we have been called, and now, but you didn't come down. Did you come down initially because of the John Keel stuff, or I know you've been interested in ghost investigation for a long time. What brought you to Point Pleasant originally?
A complete accident. I was driving through with a good friend of mine to Charleston, West Virginia, to visit another friend of ours. And we were driving from Cincinnati. And as we drove, we were getting right on the border there of Ohio and West Virginia. And I was kind of dozing off in the passenger seat and immediately just shot up and just felt wide awake, like there's something I need to pay attention to. And that was as we were crossing the Memorial Silver Bridge that takes you into Point Pleasant. And so we were passing through Point Pleasant to get to Charleston. And I'd seen the Mothman prophecies, but I was not overly familiar with John Keel at the time or the story of the Mothman and all the other things that happened in the town. But I knew something was up because it was almost as if I was grabbed up out of my seat, like, pay attention. And so I did. And we actually went back the next day to Point Pleasant because as soon as we got to our friend's house, I started researching it, looking it up, like, why does this sound familiar? Realized, oh, Mothman Prophecies. I remember that movie. And then looking more into it. And so we actually went back the following day and explored around town a little, and the little souvenir shop that was there, that was owned by Bob. It's no longer there, but it was closed, and I love a good souvenir. So I told my friend on the way back to Cincinnati, can we please stop here because I want to buy a Mothman for President t-shirt. So we did. The day after that, that Sunday, the shop was open. We wound up talking to Bob, who owned the shop, and he was telling us a bit about all the sightings that had happened in Point Pleasant long ago in the 60s, and just telling us a bit of the town lore. He wound up drawing us a map for how to get out to the TNT area where many of the original sightings happened back in the 60s, and we went out there completely not knowing what we were doing, where we were going, and I captured several pictures, quite unintentionally, of some strange myths that were they had a form to them, of humans. It was weird. I felt kind of creepy out there. And from there, I was hooked. and I didn't know what was up with this sleepy little town that I really never heard of, but I knew I wanted to go back, and that led us, friends and I, to continue to go back there and investigate. We met the Frick brothers, John and Tim, and then I think that's how we met you, Steve, through them, and then a whole host of other people. So it happened completely on accident.
But John and Tim Frick are they're the guys that fly the Mothman during the Mothman Festival. They also portray the Men in Black by day. So Men in Black by day, Mothman by night. And they have the really, really incredible circle of friends and acquaintances that so many of us have met each other through. And when you mentioned Bob that used to run the Point gift shop, he was a great guy too. And he was sort of another center for people coming in talking about all their strange experiences. And I think that's how some of us also met. But now you said that you were driving through there and something really grabbed you. Now you've been sensitive and had experiences since you were a little girl. Isn't that true?
That is correct.
Tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up as a child.
So my very first experience that I can remember, I was either 3 or 4 years old. And I know the age range because it took place in a house that we moved from when I was 4. And I remember getting ready for bed and hadn't turned off the lights yet, but looked over and there was a little boy about my age who was standing behind my rocking chair, kind of peeking around the side of it. And and I know it's crazy because I was 3 or 4 years old, but I can remember clear as day looking at him and thinking, oh, who's that? Like, he doesn't look familiar to me, but I have to go to bed. I can't, stay up and play. And it didn't seem odd to me. And it wasn't scary. It was just bizarre that there was this child in my room. I didn't know who it was, but I just kind of thought, oh, well, I have to go to bed. And so I did. And then ever since then, I've just been able to, sense the presence when there are spirits around. And it's, I've had experiences in I think every house that I've ever lived in my life. None is quite as profound as that very first experience, seeing that little boy so clearly. But definitely a lot of interesting things have happened over the years in different places that I've lived. And it's just, I've never known any different. So I'm very used to all of a sudden thinking, oh, there's someone else here. I can't see them, but they're here.
So that day you were
all comes very naturally to me.
So that day you were driving by Point Pleasant, do you think there was something, some kind of a vibe you actually picked up, or did you just wake up?
I think it was more of I don't think it was a spirit in particular. I think it was the energy of Point Pleasant, that it was a place where is a place where so many strange things happen. I mean, the Mothman sightings, the Men in Black coming to speak with UFO and Mothman witnesses, the UFOs that are seen there, all of the hauntings that, we've experienced on our investigations there, all kinds of weird things that happen in Point Pleasant. The town, to me, it just it feels charged. Is the best way I can describe it. As soon as I start to get close to those city limits, I feel it. I could feel it the whole time that we're in town. And then as soon as I leave, that feeling goes away. So it definitely has a unique energy to it. And I think that's kind of what jolted me up in my seat that very first time.
I wonder if it has anything to do with the confluence of the two rivers, the Ohio and the canal.
That could be, because that's exactly where I was when it happened.
Were you going to say something, Andy?
Yes, I was just going to say that's what we've talked about before, isn't it? The whole idea there are certain places in the world, Point Pleasant definitely being one of them, that has the high strangeness factor, to quote the title of your show. But absolutely, yeah. So, and it's interesting you just mentioned about the flow of river and water. I do wonder if there is some kind of connection there as well to that kind of effect that of water flowing can have, because we know things like diviners appear to pick up water by using twigs, essentially, that seem to be quite accurate sometimes with what they do. So it could be the energy flow is something that's tied into the flow of water, but it's somewhere that I really, really want to visit one of these days, and hopefully I'll get there eventually.
Well, you've got to come during one of the Mothman festivals. And,
absolutely, yes.
I'll take you on my tour on Saturday night in the dreaded TNT area with a guaranteed flyover of the Mothman.
Excellent.
You're also harassed by men in black just trying to get into the area. They will. They're kind of a cross between the sinister men in black and the Keystone Cops. It's very family friendly. So
I'm kind of imagine the Blues Brothers.
So and also Emily, I've been with you several times out in the TNT area, and there's been times when you have picked up on things. I think you've seen orbs or little lights and seen shadow people or whatever. I'm the guy, as you know, except for that one time when I was with you and another group on the right where the old Silver Bridge used to connect, where I might have had something happen with a flashlight. But anyway,
yes.
you've had several. You've picked up. Just tell us about some of the stuff you sensed and picked up right in the TNT area. Again, this is the area for people that don't know. During World War II, it was a munitions area. It was if you see the old photographs, there was this huge complex of what it looked like. And even back in the 60s, when they first saw the Mothman there, now it's the McClintock Wildlife Area. It is spooky as hell in the daytime. At night, it's really spooky. But just tell us maybe a couple of your experiences or a couple of things you've picked up there in the TNT.
Sure. So definitely many experiences out there. I think probably for me, the most, well, no, I can't even say that because now I'm thinking in my head through all these experiences. I can't pick out one that I think is creepiest or strangest. So I'll just give a couple. So there was one very early on. I think it was the very first time that my friends and I had met John and Tim Frick. And so it was very early on in investigating Point Pleasant. And we had gone out to the TNT area. It was nighttime. We were in one of the igloos. So there's those 100 igloos that are throughout the forested area there. Most of them are locked up, so you can't go in, or they're privately owned. But there are some.
Just to explain, those are there are these concrete bunkers or igloos they call them that they were covered with foliage during the war, so that if the Nazis were flying over, it would look like just terrain, but that's where they stored the munitions, and a lot of them have been sold to private interests, and somebody even had some explosives in there, and one of them blew up about in 2010, I think it was. But go ahead with your story.
Right. So in these igloos, we went into one that was open and not owned by anyone. And so there's a group of us, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 people. And we were in the igloo, and I kind of went off to the side to sit down and concentrate and try to, connect with anything that was in there. And then kind of towards the door of the igloo, most of the rest of the group was there with a spirit box. So that's the device that'll run very quickly through different radio frequencies, producing a white noise that spirits are said to be able to speak through. And so they were running that. They were asking questions, and then I was kind of off on my own, trying to connect with whatever was there. And I got the sense, and it was in my head, I hear, I could tell there was someone there, but I couldn't quite make out who they were or what they were even. And through the spirit box at that time, they were asking questions saying, who are you? What are you? Nothing was coming through. And they said, where are you? And through the spirit box, clear as day, it said on top. And the group said, on top of what? And the spirit box replied immediately, on top of the igloo, which is what we were in. and
it was that clear.
It was that clear. And they asked again, where are you? And again, it said on top of the igloo. And so I'm still concentrating kind of off in my own little world, but I'm hearing all this. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I don't get the sense that this is good, because I couldn't quite place if what I was sensing was human or not. And so that's always a little disconcerting when I'm not able to identify, yes, this is just the spirit of a human who has passed on, or if it's something else. So I couldn't get a clear read on it. And so I got this feeling that just told me, time to go. And so my friend was sitting next to me. And so I nudged her. I was like, we got to get out of here. Time to go. And as we were walking to the group that was standing by the door with the spirit box says, clear as day and loudly, get out. Like, oh,
Oh, dear.
All right, we're going.
And that was one of your first experiences.
Yes. Yeah. And I still went back.
I think it's really interesting that you're saying that, because often those spirit boxes, it's just random sound, this occasional word you think you might pick up. But if it's actually clearly saying that, that's pretty amazing. Because the chances of getting those words randomly coming up, those words that fit so closely to where you actually were, is pretty impressive. I mean, it kind of reminds me, of course, of the film with the strange phone call, and that was analysed. It was just electronic sound, but it was clearly a voice. So yes, then to be told to get out, it's disconcerting. But I think also the other interesting thing for me particularly is you're saying you can't quite tell if it was human or not. It's all it fits into that thing of this whole Mothman thing. Doesn't seem to fit into any particular category, does it? It blurs the lines between the different kind of definitions that we normally use for these things. That's why I find this case so fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and while we're on that subject, I always ask Emily this: how many times, Emily, approximately, have you read the Mothman prophecies?
I don't know. Probably.
Okay, that's impressive.
I think that's a safe bet.
I've read it many times, but since it came out on Audible, I haven't read it again. So,
ooh, that's what I need to do.
It's
that's a good point, actually. Yes,
there's a lot of
I could do that myself.
There's a lot of good paranormal books. Nick Redfern, John Keel, Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Linda Godfrey. There's a lot of good stuff on Audible now that people should probably check out. Okay, now we can jump back to that. I know there's a lot more to talk about Point Pleasant and so forth, but I wanted to get into some of the. I know that you've been doing a lot of traveling, and over the past the past year or so, you've hit all kinds of really interesting hotspots all over the U.S. So just start anywhere. Where would what are some of the most fascinating or most interesting places you've been to in the last year, last month, whatever?
Yeah, man. Okay, it's a lot. I very luckily for my day job, which has nothing to do with paranormal, do have to travel a lot, and it takes me to a lot to California. I spend a lot of time there, so I do have some extra time that I'm able to explore, and recently took a vacation, so no work involved, and was able to fully concentrate on going to paranormal spots. But some of the, trying to think over the last year, probably some of my favorite places that I've been would be Mount Shasta. I got to go there twice. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California. I went there 3 times. It's amazing. Went to a couple, there was a small haunted hotel that we went to on vacation just last month. It's in Cimarron, New Mexico. It's called the St. James Hotel. And we had some really cool experiences there, and actually met up with another paranormal team there, and were able to conduct a nighttime investigation because we were the only guests. So that was fun. Yeah. And we also went last month on vacation to Mesa Verde, which was a place I'd never been before. And it was interesting that we happened to go there where our original plan was for the vacation was to go from New Mexico up into Colorado and up into Wyoming. And then home, but due to weather at the last minute, we changed and went from New Mexico to Mesa Verde in Colorado and then down into Arizona. And so we weren't scheduled to go to Mesa Verde, but we did. And it was amazing. That's where a bunch of cliff dwellings are. They're in the mountains, and it's just fascinating to see where these people lived and wonder how on earth they even thought to build, not even build, but, chisel out these structures in the side of these cliffs and how they got in there. And it just blows your mind. But the significance to me with Mesa Verde is that it was one of the 2 locations, Mount Shasta being the other, featured in the Vanished documentary that came out early this year. And that was the documentary with David Paulides on 2 of his missing 411 cases where there are those inexplicable vanishings of people. And so it was kind of ironic that I had recently been to both of those locations that he profiled in that documentary, where some very strange things have happened.
Yeah, that's really cool. And for those few out there that may not know what we're talking about, David Polite is a retired police officer. I think he was a detective, if not mistaken. Has written maybe 7 books now under the Missing 411 headline. And what he's done is he has investigated mysterious disappearances, and these are not disappearances that are easily explained. These are not people that just decided to run away from home because they couldn't stand things anymore or just drop out of society. These are very, very well documented, very strange cases. And now with your when you go into these areas, Emily, and you've got that. Now, see, I just don't have that. I mean, a Mack truck could be barreling down on me, and I wouldn't sense it. You know? I may not even hear it. But I'm curious. I've always been intrigued by Mount Shasta. I remember reading articles by James Mosley in Saucer News in the 1960s talking about all the mysterious things that happened around Mount Shasta. What was it like for you? What did you sense anything? I mean, it's a beautiful area, I'm sure. But what was it like?
Stunning. It was, so going there, I was kind of expecting for it to have somewhat kind of a negative energy, actually, because of some of the mysterious disappearances that, can't be explained, as well as the fact that, and I can't remember where I read this now, but I read it recently, that the Mount Shasta and surrounding area is supposed to have the highest population of reptilians, like per capita in the world. So, whether you're into that or not, the fact that a bunch of reptilians might be living in and around Mount Shasta is a little unsettling.
Emily, that's a hell of a travel log, to say, yes, it has the highest number of reptilians per capita.
Right.
May want to go to the next county, I think.
Yeah, fun fact. It's also one of the other legends around Mount Shasta is that the Lemurians live in the mountain now. They relocated there, many centuries ago, and they come out occasionally and, come down into the town. There's a ton of Native American folklore about the mountain, and it's just I wasn't sure what to expect. I was expecting quite a bit of just like weird energy, I guess, because so many things are rumored to be around there. And what I found was it is probably the most peaceful and positive place that I've ever been. Like, as soon as you see the mountain, and you can see it from very far away, but once you're up close, even on the mountain or in the town, it feels so peaceful. I felt at home almost, if that makes sense. I hope that means I'm not a reptilian, but
maybe we get some of those chromosomes, those reptilian chromosomes.
Right, maybe. But it was just a very positive energy, and it was very peaceful. They have a lot of new age and crystal shops in the town there, but I felt very at peace. However, I will say, as you are driving up the mountain, once you get to the Bunny Flats is one of the stops where you can get out and park your car, and there's a trailhead there. Once you get there and get out and walk around, then I started to feel, it wasn't bad, but it was almost like the mountain was vibrating. Like you could feel it, like had a pulsing energy to it. It felt like it was so charged that you could just feel it in the air.
I have to visit this place. It sounds amazing.
Oh, it is. It's beautiful. There's hiking, there's views, there's paranormal, there's great little mountain lodges that you can stay in. The town itself is tiny and super cute. But I recommend it to anyone. I would not recommend, though, trying to hike there by yourself.
No.
Bad things seem to happen, so be careful.
Oh, that's even more reason to hike up there. That sounds even better.
Right.
There's a very bizarre documentary out there. I forget who did it. A guy went up there with John Keel. I forget the name. It is the craziest, most bizarre
Mount
document.
John Keel?
Yeah, they took him up to Mount Shasta. This is not too many years before he passed, and he's got, John Keel has one of these straw hats on, and he apparently forgot to take the price tag off. So the guy that's doing the documentary pans the camera around, and you see this price tag thing hanging back of the hat. But it was always good to see John Keel anywhere and hear him talk about anything. But it is the craziest. I wish I could remember the name. Well, actually, it's a good thing I don't remember the name of it, because you will not be the same once you've seen this thing. But that's really, now I guess there's been all kinds of stories of and there's stories of these tall saintly beings in robes seen there. There's I guess it's Mount St. Helens where it erupted, where they talk about Bigfoot. But I imagine that this is a hot area for Bigfoot sightings and so forth. And now, what about Mesa Verde? Did you what kind of a vibe did you get there?
That was a very different vibe. It was a little unsettling, I suppose. So in order to get to where the cliff dwellings are, you have to go in through the entrance of the park, and you drive for probably about 40 to 45 minutes before you get to the cliff dwellings. So you're driving through just remote mountains for quite a while. And I don't know if it was just the remoteness of the location. I mean, there's not really any big towns around where Mesa Verde is. And so I don't know if it was that or if there was some energy there, but it felt a little off to me. And that's really the best way that I can describe it. And then seeing the cave dwellings that were featured in the Vanished documentary. So we were they weren't open, but you could still see them. So you can walk through where the gentleman in Mesa Verde went missing, but you could still see them kind of from across the way. And I don't know. It was a weird feeling. I don't know if it was good. I don't know if it was bad, but there was something.
What's the story of the disappearance there then? Because it's not one I'm familiar with.
I don't. Maybe you recall it was one of the. David Paulides did his. Is this the one he did that was aired on TV, or is this the DVD he did?
Yes.
The TV one.
Yes,
okay.
It was the one on TV.
It was one that he talked about a couple, Andy, that were quite remarkable, where there's just no place for these people to go. I mean, they right, Emily? They weren't out of sight for very long, and it was just one of those places where even if they wanted to run off and hide, they couldn't have done it.
Really strange.
Right.
Really
and that's where they did afterwards, as part of the documentary, they brought in two, I want to say, were they astrophysicists, Steve?
Yes.
They were scientists that came in to conduct an experiment kind of around those, the kivas, the big circular kind of pits almost that you see there in the cave dwellings. And they conducted the experiment and determined, and I know that they kind of went through multiple things. I'm not going to pretend like I understand science because I don't, but their ultimate determination was that kind of on one side of this one kiva, time was moving at a different rate than on the other side. Does that sound right, Steve? Did I get that right?
I think so. You've seen it more recently than I have, and it's something that they'll probably rerun again, or maybe it's available on demand. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting because David Paulides is normally, when you go through all his books or his interviews, he's very cautious about giving you his ideas about what might be causing some of this, although he does say that there's not more than one answer. And there certainly isn't. When you go through the broad spectrum of these incredible disappearances, there has to be more than one explanation. But the implication, I guess, in this was some kind of a distortion or a hole would open up perhaps and swallow up somebody. I don't know. It's something out of science fiction, but really strange stuff is happening here.
Yeah, and I think they had strange readings also on Mount Shasta. I don't think they did the same experiment there, but there were definitely anomalous readings, I think EMF readings on Mount Shasta in the area where that man had gone missing. And when you see it, and I've been there, I've seen this area, there is literally nowhere to go. And there's nowhere you can run to, to hide on this open face of the mountain. There's just nothing. So where that man went, I mean,
And there's so many cases like that, in other parts of the
Right.
country. I have a question for you now. If I were going there with all the advanced publicity about how creepy it was, should I be brave enough to do it? I would have this underlying feeling like something wasn't right, but it would be pretty much psychological. Now, for you, were you able to? I mean, you had some advance notice that this was kind of a strange area. Were you able to differentiate at all between what you might be really picking up through intuition, versus what you might be thinking about psychologically?
I think for Mount Shasta, I was able to separate it out because I was expecting a more negative experience, and it turned out to be wonderful. So I think I was able to separate those out. With Mesa Verde, I didn't quite know what to expect. And so that one, I'm not quite sure if kind of the uneasy feeling I had, if it was related to what I knew about, the disappearance that had happened there, or if it truly was some sort of energy. That one, I don't know.
Well, it's pretty valuable to have that intuition anyway. That there must have been times in your life when it has served you well, when you made a decision correctly, when you had some an inkling that no, don't do this, or maybe I should do this. Yeah. Okay.
It has definitely come in handy. I will say that.
Have you ever felt like that in the TNT area? Back to Point Pleasant briefly. Have you ever had any really negative feeling or a negative wave of feelings about a particular instance or area there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Probably the worst was, it might have been 2 festivals ago, 2 or 3. And we had gone out, and I think you were there. There was a big group of us that had gone out there, maybe Friday night before the festival, maybe even Thursday night, I'm not sure. But there's a big group of us. We were in one of the igloos, and a friend of ours he's also sensitive, and he was kind of almost calling out for whatever was in there to come interact with him. Okay. And to me, I was like, I don't know that I would have gone about it in quite that way. I tried to be very cautious and careful when inviting something to interact with me, but he was kind of like, oh, come on, I'm here, come talk to us. And, you can touch me, whatever. And so I was sitting there again, kind of trying to be very focused and try to determine, see if I could see what was surrounding us, not surrounding us, that sounds bad, but what was with us in the igloo. And as I was concentrating, all I kept seeing, and I saw it with my eyes, it wasn't even just seeing it, in my mind, I saw it with my eyes. There is a tiny, short, maybe a foot and a half tall black mass that was just running around the perimeter of the igloo. I could see it, and it eventually made its way over to our friend who was asking for whatever was there to interact. And it was kind of crawling on him, and I just got the worst feeling, and I had to leave. I went out to my car, and I would not come back in. And I did not come back in the rest of the night, which is unusual for me because I don't usually get bothered by this type of thing because I've been around it and used to it all my life. But for some reason, I don't know what it was. But whatever that energy or that little thing was, it was not good. And I had to get out.
Do you think it had any kind of awareness itself, or is just like a blob of energy, if you like?
I felt like it had an awareness, which was a little more worrisome to me.
Sure,
when it's
absolutely.
When it's just a kind of random energy swirling around that doesn't have an intelligence to it, it's not as troublesome, but this thing, I felt it was intelligent, and I think it knew what it was doing, and it was up to no good, in my opinion.
Oh, blimey. Well, that kind of fits in what was said before, that these things, whatever they are, don't fit normal categorization of whether it's an alien or a ghost or something else. That's why I find these kinds of cases fascinating, because they defy even those kind of explanations you've come up with that some might say just daft anyway, but they don't even fit those. That's why I find these sorts of things the most fascinating, definitely.
Exactly. And then I like to go down the rabbit hole and think, well, this little shadowy form that was running around. I don't know what it is, but maybe it is a spirit and it's disguising itself to make me not know what it is. And then my brain just spins thinking, oh, well, maybe it is a human spirit that's, taking another form so that it'll scare me or do, to a means to some end. I don't know what. And so that's always a fun trip to take when I'm trying to figure out what that could possibly be.
Non-corporeal life form of some kind. Yeah.
Perhaps whatever the Mothman was. I mean, the Mothman didn't really appear to be a physical entity for so many reasons. I mean, the wings didn't always flap. It just defied logic. Perhaps it's maybe the same energy, just taking a different form, because Point Pleasant has this history. I mean, you can even go back to around World War I. And if you go up to the Elk River, which eventually flows into the Ohio, that area, they were seeing some kind of winged creature with man-like heads and about 9 or 10 foot wingspans flying overhead. So there's just a whole series of events. Anybody that hasn't read John Keel or the Mothman Prophecies, I suggest they go for that. I'd like to get back to your travels, but in just a second, Emily, we have kind of had a shared haunting experience. I don't want to mention the name of the motel, but across the river in Gallipolis, Andy, I was out in the T&T area. I went out there alone one night to try and prove my manhood. And I don't know why, because there were no chicks around to impress at the time. So I went down there one mild January, and I had no, that was the second time. The first time was in the spring, and when I was alone. And I thought, I just wanted to see if I had the stones to do something like this. So I did. And I went there, and I went into one of the igloos alone, had my camera running. I looked like a real paranormal investigator with my my digital recorder duct taped to my flashlight. Okay, so I get back to my motel room across the river, and I opened it. Now, I experienced a couple flashes of light driving down Route 62, which may have been nothing connected. I don't know. But when I got back to my motel room, I opened up the door, and the TV set turned on and started flipping through stations continuously. Now, this never, nothing like this ever happens to me. So I did what any paranormal investigator would do, is I unplugged the damn TV and went to bed. Okay, so there you go. The next year, about the same time, Emily, I'm crammed in the one of the rooms with John and Tim. We're saving money, right? And this is a nice little mom and pop motel. And we're sitting there that night. The TV set turns on by itself. The next day we were in there. The TV set turned on and flipped through a couple stations. So we're trying everything with the remote, trying to get it to through walls or whatever, and we don't have any explanation. Then a few years later, Emily. Now this was the first room I was in. The first time, it was the room next to it a year later, where stuff was still going on. And then a few years ago at the Mothman Festival, Emily, you were in there with several people in a corner room, but you're right in that same general area, and you know what I'm talking about, right? Tell us what happened. I do. Okay, tell us what happened.
So there was a small group of us sitting in the room. We were watching a football game, and so we were just all sitting on the beds and, eating pizza, watching the game. And it was just a normal volume. And then all of a sudden the volume shot all the way up. Not like you're holding down the button and it gets increasingly louder, but it was all of a sudden just loud, really, really loud. And I'm like, well, that was weird. Maybe somebody hit the remote. We didn't know. So we turned it back down and then to a normal volume. And then it does it again. I'm like, what is going on? And, none of us are touching the remote. So we just left it. And then it eventually just went down on its own and was very, very quiet. And so we had to then turn it back up to be able to hear it. But it was just very strange. There was no reason for the volume to suddenly change. And it wasn't like it was going from, one commercial to the next. And the second commercial was really loud. It was just, the game was on. There was no break in the broadcast or anything. So it was bizarre. And then also that same night while we were there, there was, and I can't remember what it was that fell, but on the desk, there was some object there. It might've been like a glass or a cup or something. And we were all just sitting there hanging out. many feet away from the desk, and all of a sudden this cup just flies off the desk and falls. No reason. I'm like, oh, okay.
And it's interesting. You had a room with a newer TV in it. The other two rooms that had stuff happening were the old style. So
right.
It's just interesting that all in the one corner to different people, weird stuff is going on in this motel. Now, my theory is, Andy, that I brought something back with me from the TNT area, and it's still there watching television. Fortunately, it didn't come home with any of us.
Well, you know what, though, Steve?
Oh, what?
That's a good point, because the festival that these things happened to us when we were in the room watching the football game, it was the night before that the little shadowy entity in the TNT area scared me off.
Well, maybe that guy heard about my guy that flipped. And said, hey,
I'm going to hitch a ride back with you.
There's no TV out here in the TNT area. I know a place where we can watch television.
That could be it. That's all he wanted.
Okay. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more, if you'd like, about some of your other excursions. I know you've done some. I guess you've done some ghost investigating on some of your travels.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, let her rip. Tell us whatever, wherever you want to go.
Yeah. So I think the most recent investigation was at the St. James Hotel that I mentioned a little bit earlier in Cimarron, New Mexico. We've seen that hotel on, numerous ghost shows. So I knew about it, and I don't know why. I was thinking it was I guess I was thinking it was in a city kind of like Taos, New Mexico. It's real artsy and there's lots of people, and it's not. There's nothing there. I think the population might be, 700 or 900 people. It's in the middle of the mountains. Literally the hotel, I think, is really the only thing in town. And so we got there, and this was last month. This was in March. So we arrived, got checked in, and there's the historic part of the hotel, which is from the mid 1800s. So it's gorgeous. It's been beautifully restored, but it's a lot of the original furnishings and decorations, and it's just impeccable. And then there's a newer kind of annex behind the hotel. And then there's a restaurant, there's a bar. But the backstory of this hotel was that it was started by a gentleman named Henry Lambert, I believe, who was a chef for President Lincoln, of all things. And obviously when that job ended, he came out west and was cooking for I believe for workers on the railroad out in New Mexico, and a land baron came through and somehow enticed him to come to Cimarron and open up a restaurant there and start this grand hotel. And so it was definitely a hot spot for kind of your token Western outlaws in the day. Jesse James, Bat Masterson, that whole gang, would come through regularly. Wyatt Earp, they've got rooms named after all these, these famous Old West figures that stayed there. And then there was a man who came through. I think he was just transient. He wasn't anyone famous or associated with town or anything, but he was staying there. And this was in the late 1800s. And during a high stakes game of poker where the hotel was bet, this gentleman won the hotel in a very lucky hand of poker. Of course, he was thrilled. He goes up to his room to, get a good night's sleep and reflect on his newly acquired beautiful grand hotel. And he's shot dead up in the hallway. I don't think he died immediately. He kind of crawled his way down to his room, hoping someone would come to help. No one did, and he died. So there's a room in this hotel that was his name was TJ. And it happened to be the room that we were staying directly across from. And we, I did do some research on this before we went, because I just wanted to know what we were getting ourselves into. And apparently he's very mean. His door is always locked, padlocked. Nobody will go in there. You're not allowed to stay in there. Staff don't go in there. He's apparently not very friendly. I thought, All right, great. And then there were a number of other spirits said to be in the building. One was the wife, Mary, of the original owner of the hotel, and her ghost is in the room that we stayed in, which was directly across from TJ's room, and so among others. And then if you go in the bar of this hotel, there are literally hundreds of original bullet holes in the ceiling from gunfights that broke out. And the owner of the hotel, he purposely built the floors to be several feet thick above the saloon because he knew that would happen, and he didn't want the guests upstairs to be injured while sleeping.
That was thoughtful. It's always, it's always good to think these design features out ahead of time.
Exactly. So there's a lot of history, we'll say. But when we got there, it was kind of mid-afternoon on a Friday. It was the desk clerk, and that was about it. And, you didn't see any really signs of life around. And I was a little uneasy. The energy was very thick, and you could definitely tell that there were spirits around. They weren't necessarily good or bad. It was just, there's a lot going on here. And so our plan was to, because we were both a little unsettled by how we felt and the energy that was there. And then once we realized we were staying in the room directly across from TJ's room, there's this cantankerous ghost across the hallway, trying to break out this room.
Did anything happen? It
did. So we got checked in and kind of got out all of our ghost hunting equipment. And the voice recorder that had worked the day before and would work again the day after we left, would not turn on to be able to record anything, change the batteries, tried everything, wouldn't work. The Ghost Radar app we have on our phones, I don't know that I really buy much into those or think they're accurate, but I just have them just in case. And I turned it on, and we were asking questions, and it was responding very intelligently, which was a little odd to me. And even at one point, I said, who am I? And it replied, Emmeline. And thought that's weird. And I looked it up. I was like, what's an Emmeline? And it is an alternative name for Emily, which obviously is my name. And so that was kind of strange.
And what was that name again? They said
Emmeline.
Oh, okay.
Amilene.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And so we could both feel the energy there, a presence there. But with TJ across the hall, every time we walked by, I'd say hello to him. It was very friendly. I didn't want him to be mad at me. And so we went downstairs, had dinner, had some drinks. And then as we were going back upstairs to the room, ran into a group of ghost hunters who were in from Texas. And they apparently, the St. James Hotel is kind of like Point Pleasant is to us. It's kind of their favorite place to go and investigate. And I know people there. And they asked if we'd like to join them for an investigation. So we did. They had great equipment, like surveillance system, REM pods, all kinds of things. We did set up a REM pod outside of TJ's room. So that's the device that if something comes within a very small range of the little antenna on top, lights up, makes a noise. So we set that outside of TJ's room. We all kind of stood back and started asking him questions. And I could tell he was in there. I could tell he was listening, paying attention. And sure enough, the REM pod would light up as we asked different questions of him, exactly where I felt like he was. So that was validating to me, maybe not to anyone else, but my feelings of where he was were definitely validated by the activity on the REM pod.
That's a good. It's always good to have the the electronic and the even though it's subjective, it is validating. But
it makes me feel better. Might not prove anything to anyone else, but it makes me feel better when things like that. It's a
good connection between the two kinds of detection. They connect them together. One's verifying the other. No, it's good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it was great, and we got a few kind of anomalous pictures. But overall, I just felt like it was a very full spiritually location. There were many spirits there. It wasn't just TJ and Mary, whose room we were in. They were kind of everywhere, all over the hotel. It was like you could feel the history that had happened there. And it was just a really cool experience. And the group we got to investigate with, they were fantastic. They do lots of great work. So we were thrilled that it turned out that way.
Very cool. And any other locations you've got? Well, you went to the what's the name of that house? Winchester House.
Yes.
Yes. What was that like? That's the house that where she was getting messages from spirits, and they were telling her to build this house in a crazy quilt pattern where stairways end
right.
That is a fascinating place, definitely.
Right. It was, well, the legend is, and I don't think any of this was ever confirmed, but that Sarah Winchester, who was married to the heir of the Winchester rifle of fortune, and when her husband died, she inherited all of this money, and she was a medium on the East Coast, told her, oh, you have to go, build this house and keep building, so that the spirits don't find you, the spirits that were killed by the Winchester rifle. And so she moved out to San Jose, California, and she started building this house, and it is massive. And yeah, Steve, you're exactly right. There's stairs that go nowhere. There's, doorways that are on the second floor. And if you walk out them, you just drop. And it is truly a bizarre place. And again, one of those places that I was expecting it to be really weird energy, because she was supposedly hiding from these spirits that were, she was trying to lose in this maze of a house that she was building on for 30 some odd years continuously. And it was so pleasant. It was so relaxing there. That was not what I was expecting. A couple of things did happen. I heard a couple of little pebbles being thrown. The piano, someone hit a key on the piano when there was no one standing there by it. And multiple people heard that. There's feelings, I had feelings of being touched on the 3 tours that I went on of the house. So, but nothing bad, nothing malicious. It was just a very surprisingly pleasant energy in there. But definitely a place I'd recommend to anyone who's out in the San Jose area. Really cool thing to see.
Well, we are getting close to our time. We do have a couple minutes left, but I want to make sure that before we go, you get all your promos in there. Tell us a little bit about your blog again and where we can find that.
Sure. My blog is called A Traveling Spirit, and it is at atravelingspirit.com. And it really is just my stories of my travels. A lot of it focuses on the paranormal. A lot of it focuses on food, biscuits in particular.
Perfect combination.
It's right. So it hopefully appeals to a wide audience, but it does include a lot of paranormal experiences. And I will be posting something probably over this weekend to start chronicling my trip from last month.
Well, we have, as they say, as a professional radio person would say, we have barely scratched the surface, and we'll definitely have to have you back. God willing, the creek don't rise, and as long as I still have this job here, so
I would love it.
So. Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely have you back, and maybe we'll have Emily back on as a guest co-host. In fact, Andy's going to be doing a solo show once in a while, so maybe he could tap you for a co-host. But anyway,
definitely,
because she's very experienced being a veteran of Mac Maloney's Military X-Files.
It's a good show you guys have, the X-Files. I do listen in occasionally, so yeah, it's good.
It's a lot of fun. It's pretty crazy, seat of the pants radio, but that's the way it goes. Well, Emily,
that's the way to do it.
I want you to stick around as we close out. But
sure.
Thank you so much for being here. This has been a blast, and we've had you and I have had so many great conversations over the years in Point Pleasant and other places about all this stuff. So you'll definitely be back.
I can't wait. And this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
And Andy, thank you for being here as my co-host. It's been it hasn't been easy getting us together with that.
We have struggled a little bit, haven't we?
But you have
in the way a bit.
You have a real job, and I'm a pensioner. Plus, we're 5 hours apart, so it doesn't always work out. So I shall do my official closeout now. I also want to thank Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, and they are our fearless leaders here at Paranormal UK Radio. And also, again, I'm going to thank Andy because he's also my producer that makes the show sound good. And so he's wearing two hats. The music was by Brian Zeller. And I am Steve Ward, your humble host here at the High Strangeness Factor, a displaced Yank here on Paranormal UK Radio. Thank you for listening. I will see you all again in a fortnight. Take care.